Okay, so here we are. We are on October 4th. Just to situate everybody in terms of where we are in part 2 of the kind of course, right? Practicum. But along with that comes also sometimes that we also meet because we have more content we need to share with you. And that's what the purpose of these days are for. So you can either attend today from 8 to 11 a.m. or next Wednesday. I mean, if you want to come back next Wednesday and do it all again, it's perfectly fine with us, but you don't have to. It's one or the other. So from 12 to 3 p.m. On October 11th. And here are the rest of those dates. If anybody is needing a reminder of those are all also on your the summer schedule document that is available. Okay, fabulous. Now, a couple things. I just want to remind everybody that the concepts manual is what I call a living document. It is on Google Drive and not published, printed, so to speak, because it doesn't stay exactly the same. It is basically going to stay the same, but there are times when I'll go back through, people find spelling errors, even though I've had other people read it, still finding things like that. So I'll go in and change those, for example. And sometimes I'll get really good questions from people that need to have clarification about something. And I might even go in and kind of clarify that within the lesson itself that's in there, like some of those concepts. So, but nothing huge or major will change. I'm in that thing, but you should revisit it often. You shouldn't just think, oh, I looked at it that one time and so now I'm good. Nope, you should go back to it probably every time you plan a lesson, honestly. And then just a reminder that you do have some assignments on Canvas. Of course, your completed core assessment goes in Canvas. Your signed parent permission goes in Canvas. Your practicum, oh, don't worry, you've all done the practicum tracking form, don't worry about that. Universal introductory lessons, that's where you scan all those universal introductory lessons when they're done and submit them to Canvas so that we see that you're done with them. And then your closed syllable lesson, which is that very first lesson right after those universal lessons. We want that as well, okay? So we don't want them ahead of time, we want them when they're done. So it just helps us keep track of who is where, and we want to just look those over, okay?
Also, you should have notes on the universal lessons and the closed syllable lesson too. We want to see how your kiddo did and make sure you've hit every target.
Thanks, Jen. Great reminder. Yeah, those shouldn't just be blank. They also should be, you should note each time that you stopped, like especially those universal ones, you know, stopped on whatever date, picked up the next time, so we can see that progression. Okay. All right. Our agenda for today is pretty packed. We're going to talk about morphology. We're going to talk about when Y says I. We're going to talk about some spelling situations and wonder words. That's the plan anyway. So we should probably get started. I'm going to pause. Okay, morphology. So you have in the Word Detective Notebook, there is this story called A Special Birthday. The purpose of this story is primarily to provide a context for lots and lots and lots of particularly morphological concepts that you will teach. So it is something that you will come back to over and over again. Now, the first time that you actually read this with your student is actually during the final VE lesson, where we talk about how whole English words don't end in a V. And so we use an E, like have, right? And then also we bring in the word has, considering that is a conjugation of the verb to have, right? I have, he, she, or it has. So that lesson is a great lesson. It kind of introduces like kind of an interesting collection of concepts, that whole, you know, words don't end in a V. hence we use an E. And then it also introduces that S, the grapheme S, doesn't always represent S. It often also can represent Z. Okay, so that's the point of that. So those aren't necessarily morphological concepts, those two, but that is the first time that you read through this story. And then when you come in, and then as you revisit morphology throughout your lessons, you will be able to come back to this and have some really good words to choose from. Now, obviously, morphology is everywhere in lots of words, but this can provide a really good context. So I just wanted to remind you that that is there. Okay, so I want us to just have a nice overview here about, first of all, I made this graphic because I think it's a really nice way to show the interconnectedness of morphology, orthography, and phonology. And of course, etymology is kind of stuck on there too, on that morphology bubble. But just to kind of show you the big picture before we get down more into nitty gritty. So morphology is the study of form and structure in a language. It's kind of the formal definition. And then etymology, by the way, is the study of historical linguistic change. That's about kind of that's a what we would say, if we say something is an etymological term, like root, for example, it's talking about sort of the historical nature of a word in time. As we all know, English has been around for a long time and taken many kind of different forms, right? And taken in words from Latin and Greek and French and all those things, right? Very freely borrows words. So etymology is a particularly important piece of morphology in English. Now, phonology shouldn't be a new term for us. It's the study of the sound system of a language. And time for participation on your end. Go ahead and type in the chat, please. What are some vocabulary words, some terms that have to do with phonology? Type that in the chat. What are some phonological terms that typically often we use them with kids? We don't really use the term phonology. Okay, good. Shannon, phonemic awareness. Phoneme, yeah. Shannon, save grapheme for a little bit later. When we're talking about phonology, we're talking about all things sound. Sound circles, yeah, Andrea, Phoneme, yeah, Oh, blending. I'm going to assume you mean blending phonemes to make a sound. Yes. Segmenting a word into its phonemes. Sure. Great. Thanks, everybody. That's awesome. So I've got a few here. You all hit on phoneme very well. Other words that have to do with phonology are like syllable, just a spoken thing, a syllable, right? Wherein we will find phonemes. Allophone is another term that we have not talked much about, but we will later. Stress or accent is a spoken language phenomenon. It's not something that happens in written language. We do not mark stress in our writing, but it is certainly a very important aspect of spoken language, and also things like dialect, African-American English, those kinds of things. Okay, great, good. Now, orthography, that word means, I like to call this my ology. I was going to try to call this my ology kind of framework there at the top, but then orthography doesn't have an ology at the end. I'm like, what the heck? And I can't say orthographyology, so whatever, just pretend. Orthography means true or correct writing. You know how like when you go to the orthodontist, they try to make your teeth straight and correct? Same morpheme in orthography, but it's correct writing. Okay, so tell me now, what are some vocabulary terms associated with orthography? I know Shannon has one. Yeah, graphemes. Things we can see and write, right? Dictation is part of the lesson where we do that. Print, yep, sure. Yep. Certainly the term letter has to do with orthography. Grapheme definitely has to do with orthography. And then also just spelling. Sometimes we say orthography, like a language's orthography. Sometimes we use that to just refer to the spelling system. Okay, excellent. Now, don't get overwhelmed by this particular graphic, which is a bit more busy than the other one. But I want you to really take away this idea that morphology is the organizing concept of word structure. That is how we structure words, is by their what they mean. Okay. So what I specifically want to show you here is, and I've made this, this graphic has had several different iterations. This is the most recent, but I really like how I added this section here about how you see the two circles for phoneme grapheme. We're very good at talking about phoneme grapheme correspondence and how those two things overlap, but we don't always situate it correctly within really the broader system of morphology, which is really where it should be situated, because as Louisa Moats tells us, we have a morphophonemic language, meaning the written language, orthography, I should say. It's a morphophonemic orthography, meaning sound and meaning are both coded in the written language. Okay, so take a look at these. Again, English's morphophonemic writing system or orthography means we must consider phoneme grapheme correspondences within a morphological framework. So I want to ask you a question. Are these things the same? The things you see up here, are they the same? I'm seeing a lot of this, so that Shannon actually typed a no. Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, nope, they're not the same. That's not a trick question. I would not do that to you at 7:20 in the morning, my time. They're not the same, no. So let's talk about their graphemes and their phonemes. So the phonemes, or the smallest units of sound for those words, are cat, right? One of those is a cat. The other one is a hat. Now, I want you to notice that I have chosen to use what's called the International Phonetic Alphabet to show those two words. And the reason I'm doing that is because I really want you guys to really understand that even though I'm showing you these words, I'm talking about how they sound. It's the whole point of IPA, is to show visibly how a word sounds. It's not easy to do, right? Okay, so phonemes, as you see there on the definition, is a distinctive unit of pronunciation that distinguishes the meanings of spoken morphemes. Now you're probably going, I thought you told me a phoneme was just a speech sound. Yeah, it is. That's what we tell our students, right? This is a little bit more deeper understanding for you, that phonemes actually function to help us distinguish meanings. Cat and hat are different only by one phoneme. And so you see how that phoneme is a minimal distinctive unit of meaning in terms of how the word sounds. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. Then graphemes is, a grapheme is one or more letters that often represents a phoneme and is contained within the boundaries of a written morpheme. So graphemes also are confined to morphemic boundaries, this time written morphemes, okay? As you can see, cat and hat, the way that they are spelled, they are different by one grapheme. If I was to also put on here the word chat, C-H-A-T, that would also be different by just one grapheme, right? So notice that how I've situated the circles this time, with morphology being the larger circle, right? And orthography and phonology within that. Because that's the cool thing about morphology. It's actually the one thing that spans both written and spoken English, so to speak. Okay. So back to this chart, I want you to notice that at the very top here, I've got in the green box, written morphemes. We're going to be calling those elements. Okay, you see that word elements in parentheses. That is a specific word that you will know that I'm using when I'm talking about a written morpheme. Yes, thank you, Alexa. You will be getting a copy of this presentation for sure. Yes, but great job taking notes. You're going to want those. Okay, excellent. So what is a morpheme? A morpheme is the smallest linguistic unit with a meaning or a grammatical function. So morphemes carry meaning, or they could notate a grammatical function. That's specific. That's usually done with suffixes, that whole grammatical function thing. Okay. So again, this is just showing you smaller portions of that larger document, that larger infographic. So the first thing we need to talk about are bases. Okay, bases can be free or bound. And so this is what that's kind of showing you here. You see how we got the green at the top, and now we're kind of looking underneath and we're kind of narrowing down even further. All right, so a base. The idea of a base is actually first introduced during the universal introductory lessons. I believe this is one that we ended up moving up to introductory universal lessons because it was such a foundational concept that it kind of might have gotten lost down in the, not lost in the sequence down below, but it doesn't really fit when you teach what a base is. It doesn't really fit with the whole like GPCs, like auditory, visual, VAKT, all that kind of stuff, right? It kind of belongs up there in those universal lessons. So anyway, that's where you can find information about how to teach what a base is. But essentially, and here this is taken right from your word detective notebook, a base is an element that carries a word's core meaning. So often when I am talking to kids about that, I will literally take my hand and I'll show base, right? This is base. It doesn't matter which hand you show base with, left or right. They're both fists. Okay, and so base, and I'll say that it carries, and so then I open up my fist and I kind of turn it over and so show that I'm carrying. Okay, it's a nice way to sort of do that. Carrying a word's core meaning. When we first, you can know now that bases are free or bound, but for our kids right now, we're just going to talk about free bases. And that's when a word can stand on its own in present day English all by itself. It doesn't need anything else in order to be a present day English word. Okay. This is your the manipulative you have for base is actually a blue square. I forgot to grab these. It's a blue square, and but also, of course, you've always, as long as you got a hand, you also got a fist, right? Over here. You also have this concept card that talks about morphemes. There's base right in the middle. You're not teaching everything about this concept card all at once. You're just going to teach about a base first. And you're going to teach a very important concept, which is that words fall into two categories. Either they're simple or they're complex. When we're talking about written words, are simple or complex. If they are simple, that simply means it's just a base, like run or back or table. Those are base elements only. There are no prefixes, no suffixes. It's a simple word. Simple does not necessarily mean easy. I don't want you to take that away from that word. It just means that the word is just a base. Okay, so just again, for your information, when you are going to be talking to your student about bases, this is what you cover at first to establish this very important concept. And there's also, that was from the Word Detective Notebook, and you also have a concept card with simple and complex on it. So lots of different ways to review these ideas with your student. Okay, now when we start talking about function or content words, we're getting more into the overlap of grammar and morphology. I'm just going to like leave that right there for now. We're not going to get deeply into that at the moment, but I do want you to see, look, there's 2 more circles. I want you to really take away this idea that we cannot be studying how the English language works by, you know, simply talking about phonology on this day, and then talking about spelling this day, and then talking about morphology this day, or even during the time of your day, right? All in terms of your instruction, perhaps with a classroom, all of your instruction should be approached through the lens of how does this fit with something else or within the big structure. And that is really hard to do. It is not easy, but you know, no one ever said teaching kids how to read was easy. And the language is quite complex and complicated. So I just want to put this out here for the moment that we do have these things called function and content words that are things that are another way to characterize free base elements. Okay. So now affixes. So going back to that big structure, we know that we have written morphemes. What was the word for a written morpheme? Type that in the chat. What do we call a written morpheme? What is the word for that? It starts with an E. Yeah, they are called elements. That is exactly correct. So another type of written morpheme or element are affixes. So we had bases, and the other type of morpheme, and when it's written down, it's called an element, are called affixes. Specifically today, we're going to talk about suffixes. Okay. A suffix is a bound element fixed after a base. That is the definition of a suffix. It's a bound element, meaning it cannot stand on its own. It has to be bound. It has to be bound to something else, either another suffix or a base. So it's any bound element fixed after a base. We've got the 2 fingers to show that. Okay, that's our kind of multisensory way of talking about these things. We also have that card. The cards are printed, I think, on blue cardstock, but it's got the 2 fingers, so you can use those as manipulatives. There we go back to that, those concept card of morphemes, and now we're looking at the suffix, right? And here is where we're introducing this idea of a complex word. I talked about how words can fall into one of 2 categories, simple or complex. And here is where we now introduce this other category of complex. So for most of your lessons, you have been asking during the spelling section in particular, is that, you know, say Matt, is that simple? And the student has always been saying yes. Okay. And that's fine. They've got a lot of practice with simple words at that point. Okay. Remember that a simple word is just a base. So it might seem kind of odd that you keep asking that question. You also will keep asking, like, is it a content or a function word? But we have to ask those questions because we are modeling for the student what questions they should be asking themselves when they spell a word. Words are built with meaningful parts. So called elements, right? If they're written down, they're called elements. So we've got to show them and model for them that those are the things they should be asking. That's the whole point of all of those scripts, is that they become, the student internalizes those questions by you guiding them and, you know, again, modeling that for them and being there when they make a mistake, when they need corrective feedback. Okay, so a complex word is simply a base with another element, at least one other element, like cats, unfriendly, toothbrush. Toothbrush is a base with another base. We'll talk more about those specific kinds of complex words later. Those are called compounds. Oh my goodness, what just happened? Okay. Oops, sorry. Now, again, before I kind of show you in your lessons about the specific, we're taking a lot of time to review this here because this is your introduction to morphology. And it's also, then I'm going to show you how you now present that to students. Okay. So another way that we can categorize affixes is called vowel or consonant. What that means is the first letter of the suffix a vowel or a consonant? It's actually quite simple idea here. If I am talking about the suffix s, is that a vowel suffix or a consonant suffix? Type it in the chat. The suffix s, vowel or consonant? Yep, it's a consonant suffix. Why? Because it starts with a consonant. Okay, what about N-E-S-S? How about the suffix N-E-S-S? Vowel or consonant? Yep, you could put a C or a V if you want. Great, what about the suffix, oh, by the way, it's a consonant suffix, N-E-S-S, because it starts with a consonant. How about the suffix I-S-T, like dentist? That would be a vowel suffix. Why? Because it starts with a vowel. Pretty simple. Now, this is not going to be this whole, there is a reason why we must make sure our students know if a suffix is a vowel or consonant, because it has significant implications for spelling words that have particularly vowel suffixes. Those seem to be our most the ones we pay attention to the most in terms of spelling changes that might happen in the base. But we'll come back to that later. But we're setting the stage now so that students think about whether the suffix is a vowel or consonant suffix. Okay, and that you know what that means to be a vowel or consonant suffix. All right, and then the other way that we classify suffixes is whether or not, it's sort of in the terms of how they affect the base. Earlier, if you remember, we said that a morpheme was a unit of language that has a meaning or a grammatical function. Remember that definition? I'm sure you do. So some suffixes affect a base in one particular way, and then there's other suffixes that affect the base in another way. So we call those things inflectional or derivational. Okay, those are some really great terms to remember for example, like a test that you might take, for example, either through this class or really through like ALTA. They like to ask questions about inflectional and derivational suffixes. We will talk about them now, but this will not be it will not be the last time we talk about them, so don't worry, but you will also be doing some reading about inflectional and derivational. So the first type that only type we're going to talk about today are inflectional suffixes. Inflectional suffixes indicate grammatical category. Well, what in the heck does that mean? Well, basically that means it's something that happens within a grammatical category. So for example, nouns can be singular and plural, but they're still nouns. I have a dog. She has 3 dogs. When I added a suffix to dog to make dogs, I didn't make it a verb. I didn't make it some other part of speech. I'm indicating to you that that grammatical category in that particular case was noun, right? It's indicating something about its number. Okay. Something else that inflectional suffixes do is alert us to the person, alert us to something called person. So for example, I play, he plays. I'm still in the realm of verb, but the suffix in that case helps me to match the person who's doing the action with the action. Okay. And also it's something called, tense. Ever heard of verb tense? Yes, of course we have. There are suffixes that help, that inflect a word for tense. Today I walk, yesterday I walked. Just as an overview example here. And then something that can happen to adjectives in terms of grammatical categories is degree, the degree to which something is the way that it is. So adjectives describe nouns, but I could say this, this pen is long, but you have one that's longer, and Jen has the one that's the longest. Still an adjective, but I'm talking to you about the degree of long that something is. Okay. All right. So today we are going to cover suffix s in depth, but also realizing that its twin is the suffix es. Okay. It used to be that everything got an es, but then we also have this shortened form, which is just an s. So they're really 2 kind of forms of the same suffix. It just depends on what they're getting affixed to in terms of the base. But these are in your foundational concepts. Why? Because aren't kids coming across words that mean more than one of that thing? Don't they like to talk to you about, I don't know, more than one of something, or do they only talk about singular things? I have a 6-year-old and she doesn't just talk about singular things. She definitely talks about things being more than one. And so we've got to address early on in our work with kids, the written form of what they already know in their spoken language to be this thing called pluralness, even though that's not really what they would call it. So pluralness is what I like to, what we can call this idea, and it's a quality of nouns. It's commonly marked with an S or an ES when writing, and children, of course, often overgeneralize this idea. And this is this idea of morphological awareness with kids. We do talk a lot about phonological awareness, and but we don't often talk about morphological awareness, but it is just as important and impactful. And we know that kids have this awareness of morphemes because they start to do things like, well, she has 2 foot, right? They know that foot is 1, like, give me your foot so I can put on your shoe. But then they hear this thing happening to words, right? In their spoken language environment, they hear people doing things to words that kind of like seem to make them mean more than one. And this is not like a conscious, no one sits down with their kid and goes, okay, Stella, when you add this particular sound at the end of a word, it usually makes that word mean it's more than one of that thing, right? So I'll say chair, but then I'll say, but there's 2 chairs. No, nobody sits down with their kid and does that. We don't have to. Why? Because that's spoken language. It's just what they're exposed to. And you'll see them starting to overgeneralize this, right? She has 2 foots. Happens with the ED, also happens all the time. So we're making it concrete when we're bringing in the orthography, the written language piece, right? Because we need to show them that that pluralness thing, that quality of nouns that is plural, is marked in writing by something called a suffix s or es. Okay, so we have, again, an inflectional suffix s or es, and it helps indicate number in our language. Okay, and by the way, it's not the only thing that s and es do. Remember that they also can indicate person. So third, in particular, third person, singular, simple, present tense. That is a mouthful. But again, not something that we have had to explicitly teach our kids. When they hear us using words like, well, I play at the playground, but she plays at the playground. When they hear us using those constructions in our spoken language, they start to assimilate them. They start to build them into their own spoken language. Okay. And again, it's not perfect, but it's this act of when we start showing them the written language, we have to make sure that it is clear as to how that particular change in meaning happens. How does it happen? It happens with an S or an ES. Okay, and there you see. First person singular is I, second person singular and plural in English is just the word you. Unless you're in the South and you might say y'all, but that can also just mean singular. It's very complicated. Anyway, third person singular is he, she, or it. That's how you know that something is written in the third person. It's because pronouns he, she, and it are being used. And then you've got plural. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna stop there for just a second. And just check in with everybody and just kind of reorient you. I know that's a lot. That's a lot of information, background information about morphology. And for you as the teacher, but also, you know, how are you going to get your kids to, how are you going to teach this to your kids explicitly? So what I want you to notice is that in the actual not Word Detector notebook, sorry, in the concepts manual, you'll see that this, because this is a really big idea and it's something that's so foundational to our work with kids, especially from this point forward, when we get to this point, you'll see I'm kind of looking right here at these 2 lessons. The discovery of suffix s. Initially, we just do it for nouns. Okay. So we connect it, that suffix s only, not es, just s. And for complex, we also introduce this idea of complex. Okay. There is actually a video linked right here in the concepts manual that talks about teaching complex words. But as you can see, this is a huge lesson. It should be completed over 2 lessons. This is the decoding part. So what we do, we've split this up into 2. There's no way you're going to fit all this stuff about reading and spelling with morphemes into one lesson in your little 12-minute section down there. So what I want you to realize is that it's actually broken up into sort of 2 guided discoveries. There's a guided discovery for reading words with suffixes, and there's a guided discovery for spelling words that are complex, okay? And so as you can see, it's all broken down for you right here. Thankfully, you've already talked about what a base is with your student. That's been established. You've also talked about what a simple word is with your student. So you've laid that foundation, and now you're adding on this layer of complexity, for lack of a better word, about the language. And it's just one more thing that has to be considered when we are, for example, decoding a word that we don't know how to read. Okay. So this whole thing here walks you through all of that. Again, remember, it's using that story called A Special Birthday. And some other things that you're going to want to remember is that you have these suffix cards. There is one that's for S and ES on the same card. And I did that because they're just like obviously so closely related to each other. Given that you are just talking about suffix S right now, what you could do is fold it. So you could fold that card so you can see that there's ES also on there. If that's confusing for your student, then you can just fold it and show them that this is a suffix S. Okay, that is what that line is indicating here, is that it comes after a base, right? Okay. And it's a really, really good idea to make sure that the student is clear about, and that you are clear that when you're using that card, you're using that particular card to review something about morphological structure. That is not the same S as the S that is what? Sun. I'm looking for my, it's going to be like for sure the last card that I come across when
It
as
is
I'm
Sun
looking.
for the keyword and sound card, Kara.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And it's going to be in here, like literally the last one that I find. You guys know what I'm talking about, the keyword and sound card. But I want, again, it's just really, there it is. It was like the 50th to last. Here it is. Right? This S is not the same. Thank you, Jen. This S is not the same as this S. Right? I mean, they look the same. And they're both an S. But there's something really special about this one down here. Okay? Because it carries information about meaning, like very specific information. Okay? Now, we are not just going to forget about phonology. Obviously, phonology is a very, very important aspect of everything that we do. But when we're talking about prefixes and suffixes in particular, or when we enter the conversation specifically about morphology, we're going to save that phonology piece as something that is talked about, but not primarily. It's not the first thing that we're talking about. But let me show you how we do address it. So what we'll do here in this lesson is that we will have words written out on index cards or Post-its. And we're going to have the students listen for the final sound in these words. Okay. So we'll say, this is the word cats. What sound do you hear at the end? And they should hopefully say, S. Okay, great. I put that in one pile. Then I show them this. This is dogs. And I'm just going to read these words for them. I'm helping them discover something. What do you hear at the end of dogs? Oh, I hear Z. Aha. There's that voiced and unvoiced pair, right? Z. My mouth is not doing anything different. I'm either voicing or not, right? I'm turning my vocal cords on or I'm not. If I can do my earmuffs, I can hear the difference. Z. Okay. So I'm starting with these two piles. So in the end, I've got a pile of words that end in cats, and dogs, legs. It's just whatever, two examples, okay? And so my point here is that even though it sounds the same, they're both spelled with what suffix? Type it in the chat.
So Kara, you just said that backwards. They don't sound the same.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank
No,
you.
that's okay.
Even though they don't sound the same, they do mean they're meaningfully the same, and therefore we spell them with what? Thank you, Jen. Yes, we spell them with a suffix S. We don't spell dogs D-O-G-Z, but isn't that something that we see kids make a mistake about quite a lot, right? We see them spelling words that have that Z sound at the end because they're made plural with a Z. And of course they are, because that's the path that we have led them down. We have been tapping out sounds like a crazy lady for all this time. So we do not want them to think that that's how that works. It's not. We are only going to be tapping the sounds of base elements. When we've isolated a base, we continue down that path that we've been doing forever in these lessons, which is tap the sounds, name the graphemes, write and name. We do not tap affixes in terms of their sound, because they are extremely, in English, really honestly, even how a base sounds is not is extremely variable, quite frankly, depending on what's attached to it. But even in this small way at first, just this simple suffix S introduces us to this idea that we don't just spell based on what we hear. It's not the primary consideration for spelling. Meaning is. Okay? Now, here's the thing, guys. Reading words with suffix S is usually not a problem for kids, as long as the word is in their spoken vocabulary. It's usually not a problem for kids to read words with a suffix S. They don't typically confuse the S sound and the Z sound. In fact, it's really hard to do that because your mouth just doesn't want to. The entire reason that this phenomena happens is because it has to do with the sound that you are articulating right before you say that last sound. It's all about co-articulation, which we have seen in words in things like an and am. We've already seen this phenomenon happen. Same idea here. But again, so your mouth doesn't even really want to say dogs. Like if I try to say dog, I have to stop dog and then say s. Just doesn't work. It's dogs. That's what my mouth wants to do. Yeah.
The reason has to do with whether your vocal cords are on or off with the final sound in the base. So in cat, the sound is t, which is an unvoiced sound. So the unvoiced sound for S just automatically occurs, cats. Whereas like lads, that D, the D is a voiced sound. So the S automatically takes on the voiced sound Z. So yeah, not only the co-articulation, but whether your vocal cords are already on or off is a huge factor. And then we've got a question from Laura here, Kara. Just for clarification, not only should we only tap simple bass, but also only simple basses for sound circles as well.
Yes. So the idea of using a sound circle to represent each phoneme is this equivalent of tapping, right? It's just we're using circles instead of our fingers. But so yes. In other words, we don't analyze affixes for their phonemic structure. We're not breaking an affix down into its phonemes.
Also, two things then, Laura. If you're doing phonemic awareness, we are not doing complex words. You're not doing words that have suffixes. So you're not doing the word ended. You're certainly not doing the word jumped. So just keep that in mind. Again, if you're doing phonemic awareness, you're only doing bases. You're not doing any words that have suffixes. But then you're going to see in a moment that spelling looks a little different when you're teaching a complex word because it does have a base and then that affix attached. So you're going to see for spelling script when you're doing words like cats, it's gonna look a little different. You're going to add a piece with where you identify the base and the suffix, and Kara's going to get into that today. So does that answer your question? A little clarifying there. Okay, and then please do ask more though, guys, as we work through this, because it's one thing as we watch observations is, we kind of see this progression that's really typical of things people understand and maybe things that take several lessons to get a little more comfortable with. And one is making sure you're using the spelling scripts during encoding and that you're using the correct spelling script, whether it's a simple word versus a wonder word and now versus a complex word. You're going to have three choices for the one you choose based on the type of word that it is.
Yes, fabulous. Thank you so much, Jen. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Yeah, this is as you can see, we are not slowing down in any of the concepts that we are teaching you. These days are chock full of more information for you. So let's take a look at decoding words with suffixes, because we are going to be adding here a step that we in spot and dot, and we're going to take a look at spelling right after this. But in the spot and dot, we certainly are going to be adding this step that we haven't had to yet of box the prefixes and suffixes. It's always been step number 2, just that we haven't needed to use it yet. So if I follow my procedure here for here's a word I want my student to practice decoding, which means I'm making them mark the word for its element, for its parts, like its meaningful parts, its phonemes, or sorry, its graphemes, all that kind of stuff, right? That's a laborious labor involved in coding a word. So the first thing I always do is dot the vowel grapheme. So here I see that I have an O. Kids have been doing this since you started. Okay. Now, box prefixes and suffixes. Now, right now, they only know suffix S. We're being very deliberate about what we present to them. So for some of your students, you might say, do you see a suffix S? And that's fine. You can ask that, okay? And if we do, we're going to put a box around it, just like that. Okay. Then I carry on with what my other steps have been. But here's the thing, guys, it's really important. I'm boxing the suffix because I want the student to see that that's like not part of the rest of what I'm doing anymore. I've identified that thing, that suffix as a thing. I'm good. Awesome. Great. Now I'm working with the rest of the word. The same would be true if I had a prefix. I would box it away. Okay. So I'm going to underline or circle consonants. Okay. Well, I can underline here. There's nothing to circle, but I can underline those single letter graphemes that are consonants, right? Those get an underline. Now I'm going to find the pattern and divide. Well, I'm not going to divide anything yet. We haven't learned that yet. We don't need to, because that only comes in if I have more than one vowel grapheme. So really find the pattern is what my student has been doing. Now, what pattern? Type it in the chat. What pattern? What am I talking about? Find the pattern. Type it in the chat. What's that mean? Pattern of what? Yeah. I'm looking for a pattern of vowels and consonants. All right. I'm looking for a pattern of vowels and consonants. What pattern is relevant here? What pattern is shown in this word, in the base part of this word? What pattern do I have that's relevant? The pattern is one vowel letter followed by a consonant. So I look at my dot. Do I see one vowel letter? Yeah, that's one vowel letter. I already dotted it. And then I look at what comes after it. Is it a consonant? Oh, sure is. There's a consonant there. So I see one vowel and then a consonant. Or I could just show that as VC. I just typed that in the chat. Does it matter if there are consonants before the vowel? Type that in the chat, yes or no. Does it matter if there's consonants before the vowel? No. So if those of you that are putting CCVC or C, a lot of times we'll call that CVC, right? But we don't, it's a vowel then a consonant. Because if we call it a CVC word, then what about at or in or on? It's one vowel letter followed by a consonant. That is the pattern that we see. So now I can code my vowel, and this one would be a brev, right? Because one vowel letter followed by a consonant means the vowel is short most of the time. Then I can scoop my syllable, frogs, frogs. Now identify the stressed syllable. I do that with that little mark right there. You don't have to do that right now with one syllable words, but we will be doing that when we get to words with more than one syllable, okay? So there's our new thing that we just learned about how to code words now with a suffix. Please ensure that your student gets lots of practice with that, more practice than you think they're going to need. They're going to code every single word on the word list with suffix S when you teach this. Okay. Questions about decoding words with suffixes. All of that is explained in the lesson. This is a difference with foundations. Students who use foundations don't typically include the suffix in the syllable scoop. Should we? Yes, because it's part of the syllable. I mean, it's not something I'm going to tell you to do that the kid does differently because whatever, but I don't know why you wouldn't, because it's certainly part of this, the whole syllable. The whole word is a syllable. But if your student is comfortable with just scooping the base, I'm assuming they just scoop the base. I won't.
Sometimes your suffix or affix is going to be its own syllable, like ness, kindness. So kindness. So in that case,
great point.
Laura, you can decide.
Yeah.
Do you just do frog, or do you kind of have it somewhere between the G and the S? But kindness, definitely two syllables. Read, a bowl, help, full, right? Even ed, technically that ed is its own syllable because it has that vowel sound et. Whereas sailed, that ed does not bring in a vowel sound. It's just d. So I don't think that's something to get super hung up on.
Nope.
Yeah, because most syllables actually are going to bring in a vowel sound, or excuse me, most suffixes are going to bring in a vowel sound.
All
That's what I mean.
syllables are going to bring in a
Because a
vowel sound.
syllable equals a vowel sound, doesn't it?
We use Reading Horizons, and it has the students code the words with different marks. Is that okay? You mean the suffixes, Shannon? Oh, they have, the students put X instead of a dot for vowels. Oh, as long as, I mean, yeah, it's not something, I mean, you can't really use spot and dot then as your little thing for how you're going to talk about it. I'm not going to quibble about coding things, as long as you understand and the student understands the purpose of the coding and what it means. Cool. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to walk you through the guided discovery part of, then we'll take a break. The guided discovery part of spelling words with suffix S. Okay. And it's going to be interactive, so you all can, if you're in a quiet place with not a lot of background noise, you can unmute. If you are in a noisy place, please do not unmute. Okay. All right. So we're just gonna, first I'm gonna get rid of this. Oops, I don't want to pop that out. I want that to look like that. Okay, and I want myself to look really big. Oh gosh, I don't, what is immersive? Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback from somebody. Okay, that's better. Whoever it was must have muted. Okay. All right. Today we're going to discover how to, all my concept cards are downstairs because I was using them with Stella, so bear with me. Today we are going to discover how to read complex words. Yesterday we read words that were complex, right? So we're going to talk about how to spell them today. Before I can spell any word correctly, I first need to know what it means. What do I need to know?
What it means.
Thank you. Great. The part of the word that carries the most meaning is the base. What's it called?
The base.
Mm-hmm. We've practiced spelling many words that are just a base. We called those simple words, right? What do we call a word that's just a base?
Simple words.
Good. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're easy to spell. It just means that they only have one meaningful part. Okay. Yesterday, you learned that there can be another meaningful part attached to a base. And that meaningful part is fixed or attached after a base. It's called a suffix. What's it called?
A suffix.
I have no idea if this is after the base or not. This might be after. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
Hey, Kara, do you
Yeah.
want to just let them know that you are following the actual script of day
Yeah.
2 in the concept manual?
I am literally looking at my script over here.
So if y'all want to take a second and pull it up, probably not a bad idea.
Okay. When a word has more than one meaningful part, we need to know what all the meaningful parts are. I do that with something called a word sum. What's it called?
A word sum.
Yeah. So we're going to take a look in your word detective notebook at a word sum, what that looks like. Hang on a minute. There it is. Handy dandy. Okay. Here is, oh, there it is. Maybe, am I sharing my screen with you? Yeah, okay. Yep, so that's a word sum. And you can see that it's kind of like a math problem, right? you see a plus sign and you see some lines. What's different about a word sum than a math problem? What do you see that's different?
There's no equal sign, it's an arrow.
Ah, awesome. I see, instead of an equal sign, I see an arrow. That's right. That's how this is different. And we know that we're going to be talking about meaningful parts of words, not numbers. Okay, very good. So the lines before the arrow are for the meaningful parts. The lines before the arrow are for the meaningful parts. Oh, I wrote an equal sign. Oh, there we go. Okay. And sorry, I got to get you guys out of my way here. And then, so we're going to practice figuring out the meaningful parts just using the word cats, because that's actually the word that was in our story, special birthday. Okay. So my first question to you is the word cats, for example, she has 3 cats. Is that simple or complex?
Complex.
Ah, if it's complex, then that means it is built in a way that's not just a base, right? How do you think it's built? What are the meaningful parts of cats?
Cat, and then the S on the end.
Aha, so you're saying, Shannon, we have cats, a base, cat, and then suffix S. Excellent, I agree. And what does that suffix S mean?
There's more than one.
Yeah, so when I say to you the sentence, I have 4 cats, you should be picturing not just one cat, but 4 of them. Or I could just say I have many cats, and you'd picture not just one, some number more than one. Great. Now is cat, so we're gonna make our word sum here. You told me that we have a base cat. Is that a content word or a function word? Cat.
Content.
It's a content word, right? Because if I change that word in the sentence, I get a whole different meaning, right? Like, look at that cat is different than look at that dog, right? Okay, good. So simple, or sorry, we have a content base, cat. So now I can tap the sounds. So tap the sounds.
At.
Uh-huh. And name the graphemes.
CAT.
Good. And now I'm going to write a name on my word sum. Okay. CAT. All right, Shannon, you told me you're just bebopping along, doing so great. What suffix did you tell me we were adding?
S.
Aha, S. Good. So let's write our S on our line for our suffix. Okay. And so when I get to this point, you can see that I've already added the arrow, but I'll erase it so that it's not there. So when we get to this point is where we put our arrow. And I want you to watch what I say as I write the arrow. You ready? Is rewritten as, I don't say equal, because it's not equal sign. I say is rewritten as, and now I can write the whole word on the line, on this line down here, because now I know the parts, and I'm going to say the graphemes again just for good measure. CATS. What's this word?
Cats.
Mm-hmm. Great. There you go. That is how you use a word sum. Word sums are used for what kinds of words? Type it in the chat. When we identify a word as this type of word, we use a word sum. What is that type of word? Yes, it is only for complex words. Yes. Excellent. And what is a complex word? Type that in the chat. How do I know if a word is complex? Just found a step that I skipped here in the a base with another element. Exactly. I just looked at Santana's. It was the one that popped up. It is a base with some other element. Excellent. That is not going to come naturally to you. Those questions are not going to flow off the tongue until you ask them many, many, many times. So I suggest that you practice this with someone, just like I suggest you actually practice all the guided discoveries. But this in particular is very important. And so to get this right, because the implications are obviously very, most of the words that we encounter in English, especially after certain grade level, are going to be complex words.
Kara, do you mind if I just show them a couple of resources, make sure they're on board?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So within the concepts manual, then, ladies, you're all females with us today. You are here on page 50. Okay, page 50. Sorry. Okay, page 52 in your concepts manual. That's when you introduce suffix s as a noun and complex words for decoding, which will be one day, we'll say Tuesday. Okay. So then you go through all of that Kara just went through, and you introduce the different concepts cards and the sound, the two sounds that S can make. And then that new concept is finished and you complete Tuesday's lesson, for example. Then on Thursday, when you see your student again, then you do the encoding part. And that's when you're going to bring in the script and show for spelling words, and you're going to introduce the word sum. So your base plus your suffix is rewritten as like cats. Okay, and you walk through all of that. Please note, after this lesson, you must continue to include complex words in your lessons. Students must practice building word sums. So in your spelling word section, because S and ES are the only two suffixes. Well, would this be considered Kara ES also, or just no? This is just
yeah. We just start with S. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just S. So you'll have caps, and you'll have ends or whatever. But you have to make sure you include a complex word from now on, or you're going to get docked. But most important thing, not getting a point docked off of your observation, is your kids are having an opportunity to practice building complex words. And it starts so simple because just the S, but eventually they're going to be introduced to more suffixes, and then they will be doing more suffixes. So realize that's in your concept manual, and that's everything Kara has just covered. And then your lesson scripts. Did my screen just change? Do y'all see the lesson scripts? Okay, good. Yep. So just remember what a great resource this is, your lesson scripts. So here's the phonemic awareness, here's the alphabet, spot and dot, PG mapping, but the second page is all about your spelling scripts. So far, before you teach this lesson, you have, and initially it was just simple. So this one and this one. The difference being, if it was a function word here, you weren't tapping out the sounds. You were just naming the graphemes after you'd asked if it was a function or content word. Over here, like Matt, is it simple? Is it a function or content word? And then you would tap the sounds, because every sound that you hear was specifically related to the regular or default spelling associated with that particular word. Then when you taught wonder words, about what lesson was that, Kara?
That, gosh.
With
Hang
they
on.
and their, whatever. When you taught they and their, that's your first time you taught wonder words. So then you needed to start including your wonder words before then, but it was just going to be one of your known words for spelling, like TWO2, if they had spelled that right when they were writing about two peaches. So then you bring in scenario 2, wonder words after you've taught, well, big time after you've taught they and their, that lesson. And so then you would make sure you included one. So now you have the option between asking, is it simple, using this first script, and then asking scenario 2, when it was indeed a wonder word, now you're bringing it in. Is it simple? Is it a function, content, or wonder word? And then if it is a wonder word, then this is the rest of the script that you use. Now that you have taught complex, this particular lesson, here's scenario 3. You've been taught complex words. And so see how different this looks? Because now you're using the word sum. So you're asking what the base is and what the suffix is, and you're walking through that and you're writing it down and you're building it out. And then once the student has it written out, like Kara was just using a little whiteboard with the word cats, then he or she would actually transfer it onto their spelling paper and then write in C-A-T-S, cats, onto their actual spelling paper. So it takes a bit more time. So some of you have been going, well, gosh, we've got 6 minutes in the spelling section. It's only taking me 4. But now that it is getting more complex because we have more complex words and we have different scenarios, and quite potentially this longer scenario where they're writing out the full word sum, that is going to take a little more time. So please just be aware of this additional element that has been included, this different scenario. And this is, of course, used during what part of your lesson? You want to type in the chat. When do you use these scripts? That's right, during spelling words. You're not using it in dictation when they're spelling the full sentence, but you are using it for the spelling words. So they have the opportunity to really analyze the type of word they're spelling. Think about it, in large part is because of meaning, isn't it? Okay, hope that helps to make it a little more clear and for you to have more success. Therefore, for Kristen and Kara and I to have less to explain to you when you watch an observation or when you're dealing with this and you're sending questions like, what? So hopefully that will help to ensure that you're not forming any bad habits or just doing something incorrectly. Okay, I think that's all, Miss Kara.
Well, that's
It
a
does
lot.
help. Sorry.
No, go
It does
ahead.
help that I just learned this last year myself. So, because Kara is so used to it, having me come in a little newer and fresher and greener, I can maybe anticipate some of the questions that you might have. Like, huh?
You mean I wasn't being clear about something?
No, you're being so clear,
Never.
but I'm just adding some more, like, as a
No, you're
person
right.
learning your approach, yeah, just kind of reiterate what happened in my mind as I was learning it. Like, that's all.
Okay, it is time for a break, I think. So I'm going to stop recording.